What is up, my eggsoup gamers? We got a lot of news today, so this is just going to be running in the background second monitor as we get into it straight from Brawlhalla themselves. Today, they just did a long dev stream and a very different one from usual. They called it the office hour streams. It really reminded me of the stuff from early Brawlhalla, early days 2015, 2016, where it's just two devs. This time it was Foda and Steven, the lead designer, and I believe the art director, and they were just chatting about the current state of the game, problems that people are having, and future gameplay direction. So you're going to hear my take on it. You're going to get a condensed recap. Let me stop stalling. The first thing is skirmishes. They talked about how skirmishes unfortunately did not reach the expectations that they wanted. What they really wanted was to drive up player engagement and player counts, and it didn't. But as a bit of a reflection, they understood why, because it didn't change the gameplay directly. It changed the context around the gameplay, but it didn't change the gameplay directly. So they want to make some changes, and this is not something that's going to go in anytime soon. They were just talking shop, some potential things that they want to do. So keep that in mind for everything in this video. It's things they want to add to the game. But this I thought was pretty cool. So they talked about having a skirmish queue, a dedicated skirmish queue that'll turn on during those events. So if you don't know what that is, it's like the sweet and sour event, the light versus shadow event, the strength versus speed event, and in that skirmish queue, they can have crazy gameplay altering game modes. So in strength versus speed, maybe everyone who queues strength gets like 1 billion strength, and everyone who queues speed gets 1 billion speed. So it's like giant hammer against gnats. And they had some other things, other ideas like land versus air. Maybe air gets extra jumps and move speed in the air, and land gets super speed on the ground. Or big versus small, where if you pick big, your character is huge and does extra damage, and the hitbox scales accordingly. And if you're small, then you're like a little mosquito, and you don't do that much, but you're hard to hit. Like stuff like that, that dynamically affects the gameplay in the skirmishes, is something that they talked about wanting to do at some point. Now I'm going to get into this in a little bit, but there's a lot of want to do limited by the amount of time it takes, and this is kind of reading between the lines, limited by the size of their studio. They didn't say that directly. That's something that I'm kind of assuming here. So keep that in mind for all of this. I also want to say that I was just very happy with this dev stream. I think I said that in the very beginning, but this made me very excited, and it really made me, I don't know, took me back to those times when Brawlhalla felt a lot more personal and a lot more transparent, and the development of the game was much more in tandem with the community together, and this sort of symbiotic relationship. So that's what it really felt like. I liked a lot. Anyway, not to get into that too much. The next thing that I thought was really good to bring up here was the guild updates they talked about. Now, guilds is something that was announced, I believe, at BCX last year. They said it might take the whole year to make, and based on the current timeline, it's looking like that's the case. So it's not like they're not working on it. It's just going according to schedule. And all the images that we saw previously were just mock-ups made in Photoshop, and now they're actually converting it into the game, which takes 100 times longer, if not more. They do have some news. So the current dev build is now interactable. They showed some images. I'll flash that on screen right now, which is really great because I stumbled over all my words, so you focus on that instead of the words. And there's also now a database that they actually have for all the stats linked to it. So of course, this is a very important feature with leaderboards. It's a very important feature to recruit everyone. And so making that all work is good. One thing that they did mention is that they're probably not going to add any kind of in-game clan server or in-game clan chat feature or something like that, because they're saying that no matter how good they make it in-game, Discord will always be better, just because that's all built up and that's sort of where everyone already congregates. So instead they have the Discord link to the guild directly on that homepage, which I think is a good little medium there to transmit people from the game to the actual community. So that's that on guilds. Some other stuff, I mean, this is going to be really dense, just so you know, but I took a bunch of notes on random things they mentioned as well. If people are wondering why certain things, even if it looks ready to ship, doesn't come out for a while, they mentioned that in order to make sure that everything on every platform, they have all of the right crossed T's and dotted I's, I think is the term, that things have to be locked in for weeks or even months in advance before they launch it. So something like a new character where they're still putting on the final tweaks, it has to be locked in well ahead of time, which is very different from how the development of the game used to be before all of these platforms: Nintendo servers, PlayStation servers, Xbox servers, mobile servers. They have to update with all of them. On Steam, when it was just Steam, they could just do it instantly. So that's part of why the staggering effect happens, where you see something and it seems like it's ready and then it doesn't come out. So that's a little bit of behind the scenes knowledge. They also talked about how their staff is pretty lean. They don't have the most amount of programmers, but they did just add a dedicated UI artist, something that they haven't had in a long time, because Dolce, if y'all have been involved in the Brawlhalla scene for a while, Dolce is one of the oldest devs in the entire game. He left quite a bit ago, I believe, to work on a game with one of the former co-founders, who is also gone from BMG. And since losing Dolce, they didn't have anyone really dedicated to UI. And so now that they have someone more dedicated, that's why things like Event Center and skirmishes and all that are coming into the game. So it's a lot of filling the gap and now having new features. They talked about wanting more accessible features for swapping out your cosmetics, a dressing room. That was a very brief thing they talked about. How they do truly believe in Brawlhalla, and if you zoom out, the fact that this is the only free-to-play fighting game that has ultimately like actually succeeded and been alive for 10 years now, I think is proof that like they really do care. And they're thinking like, we're going to develop this as long as we possibly can. So they have very long-term plans. We're not talking about 2026. We're not talking about 2027. We're talking far out. And so a lot of the things that they want to do require setting up these steps first. So that's good to know as well. Like, nobody's trying to just jump ship. And I think this is something that I have said for a very long time about Brawlhalla, and it's good to hear them directly address that themselves as well. The next thing that they're going to talk about, maybe I'll save RGB for the next point, because I just want to get to this one first, is that with all of these queue changes, they've added in a bunch of different queues that they can now turn on and off, and that was a bit of an experiment to see if that's something that they can really implement with future things, maybe like that skirmishes update. And that has opened the door for a lot of different features, which we'll get into later in this video. But that's something they're very excited about, because the infrastructure server-wise to be able to turn something on and off was a huge undertaking. So the fact that they're done with that now means they can focus on other stuff. So that was sort of like an in-between step in those casual dual queues and Brawl Ball queue and sports 3v3 queue. That was kind of like, it's sort of a proof of concept of the future, and they're going to push it further in the future. And they needed to do that first in order to get everything else working. So it was a sort of in-between addition. Let's talk about RGB colors. So RGB colors, if you're not aware, were a paid color scheme, and people were mad that it was paid because that broke 10 years of convention. But what they were especially mad about was the fact that there was a gambling element where if you only chose one color to buy, it would cost 10 mammoth coins, but you didn't even pick the character who it was for. So they talked about it and they addressed it directly, which I think was really great, and it was very good to hear. And they said, we messed up. That was a big mistake, and I think what we should have done when we accidentally leaked the color a year ago, and they were very candid about this, and it felt very genuine, which was like, we sort of tried to play it off as, oh my god, this was like intentional, this was a big brain maneuver, that we leaked it on purpose and we were building up hype, when in reality, that had always been the plan to charge for this color. And what they should have done a year ago is say, hey guys, this is planning to be our first ever paid color, and we accidentally leaked it. Because what ended up happening was a year of hype into just seeing it in the store the day it came out that it costed money, and the fact that you had to gamble if you didn't want to buy the whole thing, which felt pretty bad as, you know, fans of Brawlhalla, and it felt like it really didn't mesh with the game's identity that we have come to appreciate over the past decade. So it was really nice to hear them address that directly. They said, it's already in the game, people already paid for it, we're not going to change it now, basically. Which was a little bit disappointing. I think some kind of change to the random role at least would have been nice. Maybe something like that will happen in the future, but at the very least, it's nice that they addressed it, and they also addressed it so directly without like a script. And, you know, who knows, maybe people practiced it beforehand, maybe they had some kind of rehearsal Nathan Fielder style, but it did feel very genuine, and it felt nice. I mean, the devs, I've said this in every video I've made critiquing them, to the point where I get called a BMG shill, that I'm paid to say nice things about them, but I do think they are great people. I think they do genuinely care a lot. So it's nice that they're able to show it here in this kind of setting, which is more personal and I think less, as much as it's great they have a studio for all their streams, I do like this, you know, just office or even bedroom environment where it's just, you know, a webcam and a computer and 2 people. That felt really good. So anyway, that's RGB there. They're saying that they recognize how the free-to-play experience has not been incredible recently. And so that's what a lot of 2025 has been about, is buffing up that free-to-play experience. So that's Event Center, that's all these different free event earn-a-thons, they called them internally, where you get, let's say, home team colors by winning with every character in a row. This is the video I'm actually currently editing. I didn't know the stream was going on because I was so deep editing that video. So they're doing a lot of that. And then also, just for the game's longevity, they felt like they need to buff up the true premium content as well, which is where these Ascended skins are coming from. Because the game has been out so long that the current peak of things that you can show off in items has been the crossovers. And so they felt in order for the game to really succeed and live long as they want it to, they do need to buff that up. Which I think is also something that I've mentioned in one of these videos before. And it makes sense. It's just really nice to actually hear that, you know what I mean? Because a lot of the problems people have been having is that they recognize that skins need to be released, and even expensive skins need to be released, but it was the silence on it and the fact that it felt like they were just doing it and they didn't care about the players to a large proportion of people online. Hearing that directly is good, is basically what I'm getting at here. So there's that. Ooh, they talked about sound effects, adding sound effects to characters. Why did I wait, hold on, sorry, I looked at the gameplay for a second. Why did I decide to induce an explosion on myself? I don't know. Anyway, sound effects are something that they have to be really careful about because it can't be annoying, and also it's a live service game. People are dedicated to it. They don't want to add something that instantly people that have stuck around for a while are like, oh my god, we hate this, which unfortunately is the case with everything, and I think I'm probably guilty of that too. But they've done it a little bit with Street Fighter, and they felt like that level was okay, but something they're really careful about adding, especially considering the cost. And didn't say this directly, but from the sounds of it, it didn't sound like it was in the plans. So that is that on like voice effects and sound effects for making characters feel more unique. This is something that I feel like is really important, not sound effects directly, but something to make the characters more identifiable, feel more unique. So I'm happy to hear that at least they're thinking about it. But a little sad that does not seem to be in the plans at the moment. All right, dash changes. This has also been something that's been discussed a lot, primarily in the competitive scene, but I think people in casual as well, because people are just like jittering around the map crazy. They're talking about changing dashes and dash landing after this year's World Championships. Of course, they can't change it now because those things are coming up quick. I think the video is about to end, actually. Okay, so what are we watching next? We're watching, I got the highest rank of Brawlhalla in one day in the background. They talked about changes to stats as well, speed stat, dex stat. I'll get into that in a second. But a potential change for the dash landing stuff that they have to test internally, so it might not be good, is how fast you can snap and how speedily you zoom, and the distance maybe is something affected by speed. So Queen Nai can't just jitter like crazy, but Thea can. So that's a potential workaround, but they talked about this a lot, so who knows? It's going to require a lot of testing. But talking about testing, all of that stuff with regards to changing cues, adding cues, that also opens the door for way more experimental changes that they can turn on for like just a weekend and get really instant feedback. So that's also cool. And now let's talk about some stats changes. So they want to at least test out making stats more impactful in different areas, especially dexterity, which is far and away the lowest value stat at the moment, and only in very specific situations is dexterity valuable. And so they want to test a tweak where maybe dexterity is tied to your weapon durability. So you know when you get hit a lot and you get disarmed by a weapon, maybe high dex, because dexterity, the word dexterity is all about, you know, being dexterous. You hold on to things, you're good with your hands. High dex characters don't get disarmed nearly as easily as somebody low dex. Taros hits you 4 times, or Taros gets hit like 4 times, his weapon is gone. Thea gets, oh not Thea, who's a high dex character? Cassidy gets hit 4 times, weapon is totally okay. So that's an idea they're kind of looking at right now. And then also maybe changes to strength and and speed and defense, and maybe also the change in how those interact with each other. So lots of things going on internally that they want to test to make the gameplay different and more engaging and everything like that. They talked a little bit about how they added damage numbers and the thought process behind it. It was a long time of long discussions. And Foda, who I mentioned was one of the two people in the stream, is now the design lead, and he was really pushing for that. Foda, if you don't know, used to be a rank 1 player in my YouTube documentaries about Brawlhalla esports, because I'm talking about the old days. He's in them like everywhere. So that's it's great that he got them in. But they did also mention how people were frustrated at the fact they had to look at the top right, and maybe they're looking at some HUD changes where it can float above your head, but they're worried how that conflicts with the identity of the game. Me personally, I would really like that. I made one of the mock-ups for that. I posted that on my YouTube here. If you've seen that post, you know what I'm talking about. I say here, it was on the main channel, but you get the idea. So hopefully something like that gets added into the game. And yeah, I don't know. They seemed a little bit resistant at the very least, but they did talk about that. Other things with regards to the HUD, any kind of HUD change. So HUD is the heads-up display. It's everything you see on the screen, the name, the icons, the KO effect, all of these different things that pop up, Tesga, KO, First Strike, all of that. Changing those is really complicated because of the way that it's been coded and which gets processed first, the CPU versus the GPU, but they're trying to streamline things so that it's really easy to make future changes. So let's say the kill feed, which has been getting in the way of 2v2 gameplay, especially for 10 years, maybe you can just toggle that off and then you don't have to worry about it. So all that kind of stuff requires a lot of undertaking, and the general impression I got from this stream was that Brawlhalla has some old code. And in order to make these systems really actually work, they've got to do a lot of work untying the knots before they can tie new ones. So that's part of why things also take a while. I have my own hypothesis here too, that their team is just incredibly small. So that is, that is always a factor as well. Now let's get into a very interesting thing. I think this could be great for the game, and maybe will push up those numbers that skirmishes did not, which is rotating queues with low timers. So they talked about how in the future they want greater accessibility and discoverability for their different game modes and their different queues, and the fact that there's 6 queues is a lot, and you gotta worry about splitting the player base. But if instead of having 6 queues, they had 3 queues that were permanent and 3 queues that were rotating every 15 minutes or so, they could really go crazy. So something like unranked 1v1, friendly 2s, and free-for-all being permanent, but then things like Brawl Ball, things like unranked 2s, where it's 2s with team damage, like all that kind of stuff, one 1v1, one 2v2, and one 3v3 game mode, rotating every 15 minutes or so, volley brawl, basketball, snow brawl, like that seems cool. I think that'd be fun. I think that'd be fun to just like log on and then every 15 minutes there's a completely different game mode and you're playing with your friends, and I think that's good. I think that sounds cool. Also probably very far in the future. In-game tournaments, they talked about how that after guilds is one of the big features they want to add. There's a few big features that they want to add, and in-game tournaments where it's, there's rewards. It's based around your elo. It's a personalized experience, kind of like the way Valorant does it, but I presume in their own Brawlhalla way. Also, you can get through matches a lot faster. Is a priority because they also want people to care about esports and care about the leaderboards and everything. So all of that is on the docket, you could say. They talked about developer time a whole bunch, how things always take longer than you expect them to, and how there's this push and pull about announcing a feature and releasing a feature, or staying silent about a feature and then only talking about it right when it's ready. Because when they announce a feature and then release it a year later, people of course are going to be upset, like guilds, because they're like, oh, where is this feature? Where is this feature? Where's this feature? But if they say nothing and just work in silence, it's gonna get done in the exact same time frame, and they don't have to deal with like the backlash about it. This is me, I guess, extrapolating a little bit here, but I can understand that push and pull where they want to say like, oh, hey, this is a really cool thing that we're doing, but they don't want a set of expectations and then have people get mad when it doesn't get done according to the expectations that they are implanting in their own minds and the devs have their own internal clock. So they talked a lot about wanting to show more of things in progress and unfinished, and have all these disclaimers about how this is unfinished, how this doesn't really matter. I got 0 elo for this game, upset about it like 3 years later. So I like that a lot. I really like that a lot. That's one of my favorite things about the old school dev streams, is how even if things weren't polished, they're like, hey, this is what we're working on, and it might not ever make it into the game, but it looks cool. And then as a viewer, as a fan, as a member of the community, you can talk about it. You can maybe even influence the development by giving feedback, which is a lot of what this stream was giving feedback directly. And you just, I don't know, you just feel involved. And it feels like they're also more involved. So I like that a lot. They talked about, a funny comment was how crossover laws and all that legal work meant that if there's a crossover they want to add into Brawlhalla that has an age rating higher than Brawlhalla game, they would have to change the name of the crossover so it's not the direct like IP name of the product. I thought that was very interesting. Other thing was Stage Builder. A lot of people talked about Stage Builder, and so they briefly mentioned up, and they said, we have no plans for a Stage Builder right now. And that was a little sad, because I think that would be really cool. The reasoning they gave, though, and this is why I'm happy about this stream, is they gave like transparent reasons about everything. They're saying UGC content, user-generated content, think Steam Workshop, Stage Builder, all that kind of stuff, is amazing. It's one of our favorite parts of other games that we play. It presents a bit of an issue. For the same reason of that game rating being very important for Brawlhalla, the way they promote themselves, the way the game works, and who they can market towards, any kind of risk to that is a big risk to the studio. And of course, if people are making custom things in the game, there's gonna be some risky things. I mean, we just know this to be a fact. So that was at least, okay, I can understand some of the problems with that and some of the issues. And the other thing they said was they have a bunch of big items on their docket list. Guilds, the in-game tournaments that I mentioned, and there's so much work they got to do on those before they can even think about a big feature like Stage Builder, which would be an incredible amount of dev time. The other thing they said was a big thing they want to do before they do anything like user-generated, Steam Workshop, whatever type of stuff, style of stuff, is PvE content. So man versus machine, if you've played Team Fortress 2, even though it's primarily a game where you play against other people, they really want to add stuff where you can team up with your friends, or you can even do it alone, and you're just fighting against computers in a designed experience, because they understand that Brawlhalla and fighting games can be very stressful, and not everyone wants to grind out a game where you're losing half the time. So that is a big priority in the back of their heads. Of course, nothing's going to get done anytime soon because they got all this other stuff, but that is something they are thinking about. The other thing is talking about developing fighting games and the troubles with it, and digesting the feedback they get is very hard because fighting games are a very inaccessible game. And this is, I think, something we kind of universally can understand. Fighting games are a lot harder to get into than like a battle royale or a multiplayer shooter because you don't have anyone to blame. And in 2v2, the only other person you have to blame is the person in your call that's being nice to you. So it's hard. And if you do everything right in developing a fighting game, 50% of people are probably still going to be upset because someone's always got to lose in every game. So a lot of the feedback they get, a lot of the work is about parsing that and making sure that it's not dribble and actually useful for the direction of the game and where things should go. The last thing that they said here was that they didn't even get through half of the things they really wanted to talk about and they wrote down ahead of time. So they're going to do these office hour streams again. It's twitch.tv/Brawlhalla. And I recommend checking them out. Unfortunately, I did not catch this one live. I didn't get to ask any questions, but I'll try to keep a lookout for the next one and maybe post an announcement here or something when they do it. But there it is. Hopefully I didn't ramble too long, although rambling, I guess, is sort of the point of this eggsoup channel. I hope you enjoyed this little recap. Let me know your thoughts, and if I missed anything, be sure to leave it for your fellow eggsoup community members. All right, take care. I'm going to go back in my editing cave now.